What if the end of a marriage is not just about betrayal, arguments, or falling out of love, but about something much deeper happening inside the human mind? Because divorce is rarely caused by one single event, and more often it is the slow psychological breakdown of emotional safety, connection, identity, and unspoken expectations that people themselves may not fully understand until everything begins to collapse. Two people can spend years together, share memories, build families, survive hardships, and still slowly become strangers living in the same house, while on the outside everything appears perfectly normal, because the psychology of divorce often begins long before lawyers, paperwork, or separation ever enter the picture. And what makes divorce psychologically devastating is that it does not simply end a relationship. It often destroys a version of the future that both people believed would last forever. Today, we are going to explore the hidden psychology behind divorce, including why people emotionally disconnect, how resentment silently grows, why communication collapses, why some couples survive conflict while others break apart, and what divorce does to the human brain emotionally and psychologically. Most people assume divorce happens because of obvious reasons like cheating, money problems, or constant fighting. But psychologists have discovered that the deeper causes are usually emotional and psychological rather than purely practical. One of the biggest predictors of divorce is emotional neglect, because human beings are psychologically wired to seek emotional validation, safety, appreciation, and connection from their closest relationships. And when those needs remain unmet for years, people slowly begin to feel invisible inside their own marriage. What makes this dangerous is that emotional disconnection often develops quietly, because couples may continue functioning normally on the surface while internally drifting apart emotionally, mentally, and psychologically. Another major factor is unresolved resentment, because resentment behaves like emotional poison inside long-term relationships, especially when frustrations remain unspoken for years, and eventually even small disagreements begin carrying the emotional weight of past pain. Psychologist John Gottman famously identified 4 major behaviors that strongly predict divorce, which he called the 4 horsemen: criticism, contempt, defensiveness, and stonewalling. And among them, contempt is considered the most destructive because it replaces love with superiority and disrespect. Once contempt enters a relationship, couples often stop seeing each other as partners and begin seeing each other as emotional enemies. Human relationships are deeply connected to brain chemistry, attachment systems, and emotional conditioning formed during childhood, which means many marital problems are actually psychological patterns repeating unconsciously throughout adulthood. People with anxious attachment styles often fear abandonment and may become emotionally dependent, overly sensitive to rejection, or constantly worried about losing connection, while people with avoidant attachment styles may emotionally withdraw during conflict because vulnerability feels psychologically uncomfortable or unsafe. This creates a painful psychological cycle where one partner chases emotional closeness while the other withdraws further. And over time, both individuals begin feeling misunderstood and emotionally exhausted. Interestingly, many couples do not divorce because they stopped loving each other, but because they stopped feeling emotionally safe with each other. The human brain interprets repeated criticism, rejection, or emotional coldness almost like physical danger, which activates stress responses inside the nervous system, and eventually home no longer feels emotionally peaceful. Over time, conversations become transactional instead of intimate. Affection becomes routine instead of meaningful, and emotional distance slowly replaces emotional connection. And perhaps the saddest part is that many couples do not even notice the disconnection happening until they already feel psychologically detached from each other. Communication problems are rarely just about words, because beneath most arguments are deeper emotional needs that people struggle to express directly. For example, one partner may complain about household responsibilities, but psychologically they may actually be saying, "I do not feel appreciated," while another partner may withdraw during arguments not because they do not care, but because conflict overwhelms them emotionally. Unfortunately, when emotional needs remain hidden beneath criticism or silence, couples begin reacting defensively rather than empathetically. Psychologists also explain that during intense conflict, the brain enters a heightened emotional state where logical thinking becomes weaker, which is why people often say deeply hurtful things during arguments that they later regret. Once emotional flooding occurs, productive communication becomes almost impossible because the nervous system shifts into survival mode. Another overlooked factor is expectation mismatch, because many people enter marriage carrying unconscious beliefs about love, gender roles, affection, parenting, finances, or emotional support, and when reality does not match those internal expectations, disappointment slowly accumulates. Modern relationships also face unique pressures from social media, financial stress, career demands, and unrealistic portrayals of romance that create impossible standards for long-term emotional connection. Divorce is not just a legal process, because psychologically it often resembles grief, and many people experience emotional stages similar to mourning a death. At first, there may be denial, where one or both partners struggle to accept that the relationship is truly ending, followed by anger, guilt, sadness, bargaining, confusion, and eventually emotional acceptance. What makes divorce especially painful is that people are not only losing a partner, but also losing routines, identities, future plans, family structures, social stability, and emotional familiarity. Research has shown that heartbreak activates many of the same brain regions involved in physical pain, which helps explain why divorce can feel emotionally unbearable even when separation was necessary. Many individuals also experience identity crises after divorce because relationships often become deeply tied to personal identity. And once that identity disappears, people may begin questioning who they are outside the marriage. Parents going through divorce often experience additional psychological stress because they carry guilt, fear, anxiety about children, financial pressure, and uncertainty about the future. And despite the emotional pain, many people hide their suffering publicly because society often pressures individuals to appear emotionally strong after separation. One of the most emotionally sensitive aspects of divorce is its psychological impact on children, because children often absorb emotional tension even when parents believe they are protecting them from conflict. However, psychologists emphasize something extremely important. It is not divorce itself that causes the greatest harm, but prolonged exposure to toxic conflict, hostility, emotional instability, or emotional neglect within the household. Children raised in highly hostile environments may develop anxiety, emotional insecurity, trust issues, or unhealthy relationship patterns later in life. At the same time, children can also adapt remarkably well when parents create emotionally stable, supportive, and respectful co-parenting environments after separation. The way parents handle divorce psychologically teaches children important lessons about emotional regulation, conflict resolution, and resilience. Children do not need perfect families nearly as much as they need emotionally safe environments. And perhaps one of the most important things divorced parents can remember is that children should never feel responsible for the emotional pain of either parent. Not every struggling marriage ends in divorce, because many relationships can recover when both people become emotionally aware of the patterns damaging their connection. Psychologists consistently find that successful couples are not couples who never fight, but couples who repair emotional ruptures effectively after conflict. Repair attempts can include sincere apologies, emotional validation, empathy, humor, accountability, affection, and learning how to communicate emotional needs without attacking each other personally. One of the most powerful relationship skills is emotional responsiveness, because people feel loved when they feel emotionally seen, heard, respected, and understood. Therapy can also help couples recognize unconscious behavioral patterns, childhood conditioning, attachment wounds, and destructive communication cycles that they may never notice on their own. However, recovery only becomes possible when both people genuinely want to rebuild emotional trust. And sometimes, despite love, history, and effort, separation may still become the healthiest psychological choice for everyone involved. Divorce is one of the most emotionally complex experiences a human being can go through because it forces people to confront loss, identity, loneliness, fear, disappointment, and sometimes even parts of themselves they never fully understood before. But the psychology of divorce also reveals something deeply human, that relationships are not sustained by romance alone, but by emotional safety, empathy, communication, mutual respect, and the ability to remain emotionally connected even during difficult moments. And perhaps understanding the psychology behind divorce can help us build healthier relationships, communicate more honestly, recognize emotional disconnection earlier, and become more emotionally aware of the people we love. Because in the end, most relationships do not collapse suddenly. They slowly weaken in silence long before they finally break apart. If you found this video insightful, make sure to subscribe to Mind Science Simplified for more deep psychological insights into human behavior, emotions, relationships, and the hidden patterns shaping our lives. And let us know in the comments, what do you think destroys relationships most often? Poor communication, emotional neglect, or unresolved resentment?